Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk, kind enough to join us on easily his busiest day of the year. He starts everything off on NBC Sports on Peacock and ends it every day with Pro Football Talk live as well as PFT PM. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great, Rich. How are you, buddy?
I am doing well. What happened last night, best you can tell? What happened last night?
Well, what happened last night in this age of analytics, what do you gain from winning? What do you gain from losing? And I've been arguing for years that once a team knows it's out of the playoffs, there's no benefit in winning games. The benefit is in losing games. And the NFL would prefer that there be a firewall in the minds of fans, and plenty of fans haven't figured out the connection between sinking in the standings and rising in the draft order. But that's the incentive. That's the temptation, as long as it's there. And now that we are at a time where you've got advanced mathematic degrees swarming all over these NFL front offices, and everything becomes a formula and an equation. And I'm not saying that's wrong. All I'm saying is this is a natural outgrowth of it. What do we gain from winning the game? What do we gain from losing the game? It's a no-brainer that you, at the right time, make the switch to Nate Sudfeld and let nature take its course. The Buccaneers did that week 17 of the 2014 season when they were leading the Saints in the fourth quarter 20-7. They took out almost all their starters. They lost the game. They secured the first overall pick. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens. I think the fact that it happened on a national stage, the last game of the season, it's a little more special. It's the hand-picked game. It's the game that's supposed to be compelling. And you've got Washington and the Giants, both with direct significance attached to it, and then the Eagles just say, we concede. That's what I think is rubbing people the wrong way, and it's also waking a lot of people up to the fact that this is a real temptation, because I think a lot of fans just don't understand that.
Well, I mean, the general sense of things and the way that we now in this day and age discern the general sense of things is what are people saying on Twitter in real time. It went from outrage to wondering out loud if Doug Peterson was attempting to get fired, because now Wentz is pissed because he was a healthy scratch, and Hurts is you could see him mouthing the words saying it's not right. He's now disillusioned, and either one of those two is the future. We know Nate Sudfeld is not. So the question is clearly if he's sticking around, then we know somebody else ordered the code red on game 256. Who ordered the code red on game 256, and is the NFL caring to find that out? Mike?
Well, it's funny when you talk about Peterson trying to get fired. I'm thinking, well, initially he tried to spill strawberry sauce all over Chuck Bednarik's uniform. Then he dragged the Super Bowl trophy around the parking lot from the bumper of his car, and then he went streaking in a bodysuit. But no, this is his way of keeping his job. He knows he's keeping his job. This comes from higher in the organization, whether it's from the general manager, whether it's from the owner. This is an idea that really isn't all that next level from a, hey, look, we look at what the Jets gave up. Your Jets, Rich, 3 years ago to move from 6-3. They gave up 3 second-round picks. Those are key picks. Those could be core players who form the nucleus of the team for years to come. They had to give up 3 second-round picks to move from 6-3 to get Sam Darnold. That difference between 6 and 9 is significant. So, yeah, I think it came from higher in the organization, and I think it's a sign that Peterson is safe, not that a sign that he's trying to get out, because he's going along with this plan because the payoff is going to come in April and beyond based upon who they get with that 6th overall pick.
And based on that, his attempt to go for it on 4th and 4 rather than tie the game with a chip shot field goal was kind of gutsy. I mean, if Hurts actually connected on that pass, they'd have had the lead and the defense might have held on to it. So my last question for you here on this is, you know the history of our league, being so involved in it for as long as you have. You know that when the Colts took a knee on an undefeated regular season to keep Peyton Manning safe for the playoffs, the NFL decided, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the schedule and jam as many division games in week 16 and 17 to keep so much alive and so much important for even the teams that have 13-1, 14-1 records. What's the fix here? Is there going to be a fix, do you think, for something like this?
I don't think there is a fix. The league will say in one breath that no one tanks, because I think they want to continue to push this idea that there's no connection, there's nothing to see here, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, because there's really nothing they can do. And, in the next breath, the argument is teams can decide who they want to play and when they want to play them. And we see starters get rested in advance of the playoffs. we see a guy like a Tua Tagovailoa, who maybe isn't the best quarterback on the roster, but he's playing because the Dolphins want to develop him instead of going with a guy who may be better equipped to win football games in Ryan Fitzpatrick. They're not going to second-guess that. I think going forward, the one little incremental change that comes from this is when the NFL is picking that game 256, or what, next year it's going to be game 256 plus 16.
Right, game
is 272.
Game 272. I know we're verbal. We're verbal.
270 forever.
Right.
But whenever they pick that primetime game in what will be Week 18, that's going to be a factor. They're going to have to ask themselves, is the opponent going to try to win this game? I think we all assumed the opponent was going to try to win. And that's one of the things I was upset about is I wish I had seen it coming, because I've been pushing this theory for years, and I rush into this thinking, oh, this is going to be great. The Eagles are going to put Jalen Hurts out there, and I think the Eagles are going to beat them. Well, if I didn't know what was going to happen, no, there's no way the Eagles are going to beat them, because they're not going to try to beat them. So I just think that the NFL will look at that when making those decisions late season about what games to put in primetime. That's the major takeaway, because short of a draft lottery, that still removes all temptation to tank. And the only draft lottery that removes temptation to tank is to say all non-playoff teams get one ball in the hopper.
Oh, boy.
That you don't get more if you do worse, because then the temptation to tank is still there. And unless they do something like that, the temptation to tank is always going to be there.
Pro Football Talk Live and PFT, PMs, and Pro Football Talks. Mike Florio here.
It is 272. Why did I not? How could I not add 256 and 16 on the fly? What is wrong with me?
Because you're too busy paying attention to which coach is being hired and fired and things like that. You've got a lot of plates spinning, Mike. So let's start with the Jacksonville Jaguars having dispatched Doug Marrone today, and they've got a ton of cap space. They've got a general manager position and a coaching position open. So that entices a bunch of coaches who have their own handpicked general manager in mind. You also had an owner today, Shad Khan, say that, interestingly enough, he said he had roster control for 2020 and plans to keep it for now. How do you see all of this playing out with Trevor Lawrence also getting set to arrive for whoever wants this job?
Well, the widespread chatter is that it's Urban Meyer's job if he wants it. And the reason that's the widespread chatter, Rich, is he's telling people that. He's lining up the staff. He's going to be able to hire a GM. He has reached out to potential GMs who would join him in Jacksonville. It's his if he wants it. I've heard he wants $12 million a year, which isn't all that crazy. If Matt Rule's getting $9 million a year right out of the gates from Baylor to Carolina, and you're going to hire Urban Meyer to run the show, and he's as accomplished as he is, $12 million is not crazy when you consider what coaches are making. And I thought they were hanging on to Marrone until they knew that they were going to get Meyer. Now, look, this doesn't necessarily mesh with the spirit of the Rooney Rule to line up Meyer before you fire Marrone and then go check the boxes on interviewing minority candidates, but that wouldn't be the first time it's happened, and there's nothing the league can really do about it. But it's all pointing toward Urban Meyer at this point. And as of yesterday, the understanding was it's his if he wants it, and the question was, does he want it?
So he doesn't want the Jet job because he likes Justin Fields so much? I mean, he doesn't want that, Mike?
Well,
what do you?
Hey,
I know
that's going to get very interesting. That game Friday night. Look, and I understand Trevor Lawrence is regarded as a generational talent, and there's a huge gap between him and Justin Fields.
Yes.
But if you go to Jacksonville, you don't have to use that number one overall pick. You could do a flip-flop with the Jets. If the Jets want Trevor Lawrence, you get Justin Fields, and you pick up more draft capital in the process. So it doesn't mean that he won't get Fields. He doesn't have to get Fields with the first overall pick. But that's definitely going to be a factor if he ends up in Jacksonville.
And this brings us all full circle, which is tank when you have the opportunity to do it. Because you don't...
And see, the Jaguars did it more subtly. They go with Mike Glennon instead of Gardner Minshew, right? In Week 16 when it still was...
Don't forget Jake Luton. Don't forget Jake Luton.
James Robinson while he was banged up. Well, he's not going to play this week. And it's not in prime time. There's a way to do it that isn't as obvious, and I think the Jaguars were far more subtle about it.
So what are the Jets going to do with their? Is it Joe Douglas's call, or I haven't heard the two dreaded words of corn and ferry yet, which normally happens. What's happening here with the Jets?
Well, the wild card is Woody and Johnson because he will be back January 21. I didn't understand how this worked. I figured he would remain the U.S. ambassador to the U.K. while the the process of confirming a successor unfolded. For career diplomats, they stay in place. For political appointees, they're gone as soon as the president who appointed them is gone. So January 21, Woody's coming back. How involved is he going to be between now and January 21? How involved will he be at the end? Will he be in on the interviews? Is he going to come back to Christopher and say, can I please have back the keys to the car that you've run into a ditch? So that's really the question here, and we don't know the answer to that yet. But we do know he'll be back January 21. How active he is in the short term remains to be seen.
But so who have both of these teams lined up to talk to? Because the Lions are now in this mix. The Texans are obviously gotten a head start. The Chargers are now in this mix. Let's take it one at a time here. You mentioned Urban for Jacksonville. What about the Jets? How that stands right now?
Well, today's the day where we get the flood of names of all of the coaches with teams that are still in the playoffs who are being requested permission interviews. So, we're going to see a long list of guys who will be interviewed. The Jets haven't let it be known who they may be targeting. There's no one out there like an Urban Meyer who is lining up, people and making it clear that he's got this if he wants it. So the Jets haven't given anyone the indication yet. I'm fascinated by the possibility of Jim Harbaugh. I don't know what the latest is on his extension. It's not a coincidence that the extension talk bubbles up the day before the last day of the NFL regular season, and teams have been doing their homework on Harbaugh, and I know that he would not be all that upset about possibly going back to the NFL, and I know that Woody Johnson has been smitten with him, and they've thought about him in the past. So, look, I don't know that he's the right guy for that market, but that's a guy that's one of those that beyond the usual suspects, beyond the lather, rinse, repeat candidates we're going to hear about for all these jobs, that's one to me that I find intriguing, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
The lather, rinse, repeat are Eric Bieniemy, the OC in Kansas City, Robert Saleh, the DC from San Francisco. Who are some others that are going to be thrown out there?
Brian Daboll, the Bills' offensive coordinator, is coming into the mix. And sometimes the names will surprise you, like Matt Eberflus. There wasn't a whole lot of buzz about him in the regular season, but now he's gotten multiple requests. He's the defensive coordinator with the Indianapolis Colts. And some of these other guys, we were expecting maybe Byron Leftwich and Todd Bowles to be on the list, and maybe they will be. But the two coordinators for the Buccaneers, they've finished strong, and especially Leftwich on the offensive side of the ball. I'd expect him to start getting interviews. I think that because of the minority hiring rates and where the league has been and what the league is doing to try to turn it around, there's going to be a lot of pressure on teams to have inclusive, diverse searches. That's what surprises me about this idea that the Urban Meyer cat is so far out of the bag in Jacksonville, where it looks like he's the guy. I think most teams are going to keep their cards close to the vest. They're going to interview a lot of guys and take their time and not rush into it, even if they secretly know who it is that they want to hire. I think we're going to hear a lot of names over the next week or two of guys who are getting an opportunity to sit down and interview for these jobs.
A few more minutes left with Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk Live, PFTPM, right here on Peacock, Pro Football Talk on digital and social media, as well as the internet, so on and so forth. Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. Why did the Chargers part ways with Anthony Lynn? What about that decision?
Well, when you've got a great young quarterback who could be a potential transcendent talent, and if I was a Dolphins fan, I'd be losing sleep, and I'd be getting treatment for an ulcer over the fact that they took Tua Tagovailoa over Justin Herbert. Herbert's the real deal, without question. And they need somebody who's going to get the most out of him. And there's just been so many incidents you can point to this week where Anthony Lynn hasn't managed games properly, hasn't made the right decisions. That's your most important function. On game day, the game plan is made. Your offensive coordinator is going to handle the offense. The defensive coordinator is going to handle the defense. And your job is to manage the whole thing. And there are key decisions that need to be made. And when you consistently make the wrong decision in those spots, at some point there's going to be a change. The Chargers kept their cards very close to the vest out of respect to Anthony Lynn. I think they've known for weeks this is where they were going. They said nothing to anyone. They waited until today. They waited until the season was over. They probably even waited until now to start doing any real work behind the scenes, because that word gets out as well once you start trying to line up candidates. And now they go about filling what I think is a very attractive job because of the presence of Justin Herbert and some of the other talented players they have. If they could just keep these guys healthy on a consistent basis, the Chargers could be a great, great team.
So anybody else, do you think, is going to surprise and fire somebody? What do you think? What does that stand?
Well, there's always a surprise, except when there isn't. I think last year's surprise is there wasn't a surprise.
Right.
There was some chatter about Zach Taylor, enough chatter that the Bengals issued a statement this morning that he's coming back. And, the Bengals don't like to pay people to not work. So I never really thought that Taylor was going to get fired because they don't want to give the guy a buyout. Now, we sit and we watch and we wait. There really isn't any other spot that's smoking. But that's the setup for the surprise. That's the thing that will happen on a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, and we all say, holy crap, we didn't see that coming. So the ground is fertile, Rich, for a surprise. And now we just wait to see if a surprise happens.
And then my last one for you, did the Bears finish the way that they finished? I know that they did. They still got boat raced in the fourth quarter by Green Bay, which is just a remarkable team this year. Did their finish and the fact that they're in the playoffs and, they're going to New Orleans, we'll see how that goes. That was going to be the matchup if there wasn't a double doink a couple of years ago. Do you think that this is now going to run it back situation? Pace and Nagy and even Trubisky. What do you think about the way the Bears finished?
Rich, I think Pace and Nagy will be back. Trubisky is to be determined based upon what he does in the postseason.
How about
they
that?
didn't pick up his fifth-year option. So he becomes a free agent unless they sign him to a new contract or use the franchise tag. I think they'd have to at least get to the NFC Championship game before they'd start thinking about the franchise tag. Now, if the salary cap drops to $175 million, the franchise tag values drop in a commensurate number. So it actually could end up being cheaper to use the franchise tag on Trubisky this year than it would have been to pick up his fifth-year option based on how low this goes. But he's got to prove it still. And, he's going to be able to hit the open market. If he hits the open market right now, I don't know that there's a rush for his services. And if the Bears want to keep him, they'd be able to sign him and bring him back. If he starts having success in the postseason, that's when the analysis changes because now you got 18 teams sitting at home making their plans for next year, and they see Trubisky light up the Saints and beat the Saints in New Orleans. You're going to feel differently about him going forward. So I think the key is what does he do this week and next week if there is one. But Nagy and Pace, I think, will be back.
Mike, appreciate the time as always. Certainly on a busy day, I would love to have you on much more often, even this month. As now 18 teams, it's been 20. 18 teams have hit the non-playing season, which means they're 0-0, starting to try and get back into the mix. Lots happening. I appreciate the time, Mike. Happy New Year.
Anytime you want me, Rich. All I'm doing is sitting here typing and talking, and I can always fit it in.
Greatly appreciate that.
They think we work hard. All we do is type and talk.
Type and talk. Pro football, type and talk. Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. Thanks for the call, Mike. That's Mike right here on the program at Pro Football Talk. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.